propagating. That means it's close. Oh, all right. We'll go ahead and get started. All right. Boy, we've got a crew in here today. Thanks everybody for joining us. We decided to do this in my cubicle office today rather than in the council chambers. So if you hear any background noise, that's just Laura helping. So, and she knows to be quiet. So we are live streaming. So those folks who are joining us on Facebook and YouTube, welcome. At our last meeting, we didn't have a great big gathering of people. I think just Dominic and Misty were able to join us. That was just fine. We did discuss kind of some future plans for the task force. Now that there's maybe somewhat of an end in sight for us. But I guess to kick things off, I think what we'd like to do is probably just start off with the biggest piece we've been discussing here is the survey that Chris have been working on. And so I'm curious if you guys want to provide an update at
all. Yeah, I can. This is Chris Kelly. I can go first. And I have to apologize. My work life exploded the last couple weeks. And so I actually haven't had the time or quite frankly, the focus to put toward the survey. So I have not done anything on that yet since our meeting a couple weeks ago that I was on. However, can you guys hear that? I just had a Jake break go by my house. Wow. Anyway, that was awesome. Terrified me. So anyway, though, my schedule has lightened up considerably as of yesterday afternoon. And so if it is something that the group still wants to pursue, I do have the time and energy to put toward that. So Chris, the other Chris K, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
I will. Thank you. Good to hear you all. I have been in the same boat as Chris and mostly have been working on a survey for TIBID, which I think will be a great sort of example. Of course, it's just focused on lodging, but we've really blown out the data we could gather to inform and interpret it. It should be out this week. So I think it would be a great thing for us to take a look at and then continue sort of on our journey to figure out what it is we're trying to accomplish. It's kind of my experience that it's easy to say, let's do a survey, but where it all comes down to is having questions that you want answered. And I think that's the key part for us still. Wouldn't you agree, Chris, that we're kind of at the place of saying, what do we want to find out?
Yeah, and I think, and we had a good conversation about that. So I think we can take some steps at, drafting up what we think would be useful information, and then bringing it up and getting feedback from folks. And, and I think it's changed a little bit in the last couple of weeks as well, what folks need.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to decide also like short-term, long-term. Are we looking at short, mid, long? Because really there's going to be different needs right now than there will be 6 months from now, than there will be 2 years from now. The most actionable is probably the long-term because we can raise money and get grants and do things to implement more readily if we look at the long-term than in the short-term. Sometimes not, depending on where the money is going to come from. But I do think this, I'm kind of very excited about what this survey is telling us from 6 simple questions, because we're able to, and it will be relevant to y'all for lodging anyway, and maybe give us some insight. So at least we'll be able to look at that. And then I think we do have enough to get a design going. We had a call with Lorraine and chit-chatted about that. So we just have to get our schedules together and do that again.
Yeah, and I can get my thoughts together and send them over to you, Chris.
Cool.
And we can.
Do you guys have, I mean, Brandon and company there in the leadership, do you have any more guidance for us? I mean, have you thought of more? I mean, what really helps is that kind of guidance. In other words, what problems are you trying to solve? so that we can be informed in that way.
You know, I don't know, Chris, as though we have any guidance. I think that the idea of a survey was probably to more or less guide the task force's guidance to the town to say, oh, here, you know, here are what the needs are of the business community, you know, in our area, and based on that data, we would hope that maybe some recommendations would come from that data from you folks as to if there are any policy decisions or programs that need to be implemented from either the town of Stevensville or some other regional group that can help in those situations that we see where those needs are.
Okay. Well, we just need to get it in gear then, and get going.
Sure. And I think that, you know, I'm not discouraged. I hope that you're not. I'm not discouraged that we don't have a survey out yet, or that that there is a delay, because I think, you know, even this afternoon, things are going to change with the governor's press conference, and you know, he's talking about the possibility of moving into phase 2 with the state. So that's going to, I think, change the outlook a little bit on the optimism that businesses feel for their own organizations. And so I'm curious to see, you know, what the governor's remarks are today, and how that's going to impact our community and how we proceed towards reopening, because we've been waiting for phase 2 for quite a while, or at least to have a date in mind as to when phase 2 would happen. I know from the administrative standpoint, or the administration's standpoint, we're looking to phase 2 as the time where we can start holding public meetings again, because since March 23rd or March 26th, we have not had a city council meeting, and that's really slowed things down for this organization. So we're very eager to see that come back into play with public meetings and gatherings, and so I think that having the survey maybe after that phase 2 would maybe even give us some better insight, and it wouldn't be, for lack of a better term, premature, or wouldn't tell us something maybe we already knew. I'd like to learn something new from the survey.
I also want to point out that if you go to visitbittervalley.com, the state has asked their hired contractors, big money, smart people, to do some data collection on visitor attitudes. And there's a survey that pops up when you go to the site. And again, it's geared toward visitors, potential visitors. And so if you're at all interested, you might want to just check that out, because I think it goes to what people are trying to figure out about who's coming and what their expectations will be, which is not going to be like before. And yet we're not very informed about what it is people are going to be looking for. And I think that even if we're talking about tourism, I mean, just considering visitors in general, I think that's going to be incredibly informative, because I've come to see it that the visitors are going to set the criteria, not us. You know, we can be open all we want, but if we're not offering what visitors are looking for, there'll be a mismatch, and it's going to definitely be different than before. So I think it went up on the 20. I think it went up on Friday, and I don't know how long. I think they're going to leave it up for 2 weeks, but I expect a whole lot of data to come from that.
I have a quick, I don't know, poke my nose in here for a second. So I'm going to be going around with Jody with the Bitterroot Chamber tomorrow to Stevensville businesses, and just kind of get a feel for what they've been experiencing, or, you know, hardships they've been having and things like that. Are there any questions that you guys specifically have that I might be able to ask, and not take an official survey, but kind of have some information from the direct businesses in our town that you'd want me to maybe ask?
I have two. I mean, I don't know if you like either one, and feel free to, use your judgment. One would be, what have you participated in the past that might be brought forward? In other words, is there stuff we know we have that we could use here, and very generically? Because I think people don't usually think about what we've got as a tool when they're facing something as unknown as this is. And then the second thing is to really, I don't mean press gently to say, what is it specifically? Because I think people don't know what they need often. And to try to get them to better articulate that.
You mean as far as their needs?
Yeah.
What exactly do they need?
I think they're going to say we want the customers back like in the old days, and that's not very actionable, right? So a follow-on question I would ask is, well, things are going to be different in the future. How are you changing your business, or do you need to learn about what tool do you need to figure out how to make your business attractive for the new economy that's coming, right? So that we start to try to parse out what people are willing to do, as opposed to sort of just express, a frustrating, I want it to be back kind of thing, or, to get down to what work are they willing to do to help make their business a success. I don't know, maybe that's too weird of a question, but that's what I want to
No, I can modify that as needed.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have questions they would be interested in hearing answers to, or I don't know, feedback from?
Yeah, I think just to add on to what Chris had said, I think, yeah, it is what kind of training tools, resources would they take advantage of, because I think they're sort of the passive, request funding, get funding, use that funding, but then there's them showing up and learning something, doing something, what kind of resources and tools can be provided to them, that what kind of trainings can we look at bringing in?
Okay.
And hey, Jamie, you might ask maybe are they up? Are they down? Where are they year after year? I've talked to several different businesses that are saying they're even with where they were last year or even above. So that might be might be brought up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true in the lodging too. A lot of people are in the tank, but then people who consistently market and who have been strong are fine. And so it's kind of surprising to me.
Okay.
I think we may find that, across different sectors. When we saw coronavirus hit initially back in March and April, it was obviously the small businesses, the businesses that provide services or sell non-essential goods that were seeing the biggest hit. Our grocery stores were obviously doing just fine. And so I think that may, the statistics may change from sector to sector, but I think even if the questions we're asking can garner positive information, I think we look at economic support and recovery and we think we need to be helpful and we need to support these businesses. But if the information we're getting back is that, they're doing very well, given the circumstances, then that's good information to have, because then we can put resources in the right place rather than putting them someplace where they'd be redundant.
I agree, because a lot of times with and you might, if you're going to go to a restaurant, you might ask them, because people couldn't go sit down at a restaurant for so long. Are they now going more often than they would have? And there's the restaurant seeing the profits from that.
Okay. So I guess, yeah, the focus would be on resources that they would need to move forward in the new normal, right? And then comparisons as to where they were last year. Anything, like I look at clientele, is clientele the same? Is it different? Are they pulling from different areas, or is it just people locally that are coming into their stores or using their restaurants, things like that? And I do have some other questions, but I just kind of wanted to pick your guys' brains going in.
Jamie, one of the questions I'd be curious to know the answer to is how do our businesses depend on the events and promotions in our community?
Mhm.
Because
they
as
rely
a
on
local
them?
government, we're put in a very awkward position where we may see event permits come forward that we need to weigh the public health aspect of those events and those gatherings. And by and large, I think events and stuff are taking it upon themselves to cancel or to modify. But I guess I'd be curious how businesses, and maybe one way to ask it is, our business, for example, Creamery Picnic, are businesses downtown counting on Creamery Picnic to make up any losses that they experience because of COVID-19?
Yep.
Or
Okay.
are they planning forward as if that event wasn't going to proceed?
Okay.
In that vein, Farmers Market has approval to start on the 23rd of May. They've pulled their permit, and we've approved that permit with conditions that they have to comply with social distancing guidelines and any public health regulations relative to that industry. So, next weekend, we will see Farmers Market back on West 3rd, and then that'll be an encouraging sight. I'm curious to see how the general population interacts with that event. And it's going to kind of be an interesting experiment to some degree, because we get to see it every Saturday as time goes on, rather than one event and then it's done. So it'll be interesting to study to see what attendance looks like and how people interact with that.
I'm sorry, did you just say that your market is open on what date? Because we're just sending out some social media this week on Farmers Market. I want to include it.
Stevensville's Farmers Market is scheduled to start May 23rd.
Sure, so we could.
Yeah, this Saturday. So, and that's what their permit says. I have not heard that they're not going to start that day. I think they're planning to start that day, but yeah. So.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I'm kind of interested to see how many businesses partner together or like combine their events. So say on Saturdays, we should, businesses should partner together and have like sidewalk sales, things like that.
Along with the farmers market, you mean? Like that kind of a deal, or their own, like get together and do it?
Both, I guess. We can have like ladies' nights out where all the businesses, do a theme or something where they all get together and kind of almost piggyback on each other, or an event in town, or,
Yep.
Yeah.
And piggybacking on that, I guess what we need to know is are there steps that we can take or that we need to take or that are expected of us to reinforce that our community is a safe place to be from the germs, as we explain to our kids? Are there things or steps we need to take? Is there education we need to provide, or some sort of campaign we need to adopt that says, yes, it's safe to come to Stevensville, it's a clean community, we're taking precautions to keep our neighbors and our visitors safe. I guess we need to know that from the businesses, if that's expected of us, or what that landscape looks like, and if there's something we can do there. Okay. Anything else on that vein? That was a really interesting conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for your input.
So there is one, sorry, I lost my train of thought and I didn't take notes before the meeting to give myself an idea of what we were going to discuss. There is one question I'd like to pose to this committee, and I don't necessarily expect an answer today, but something I'd like you to consider. And Dominic and Misty both heard me discuss this at our meeting last week. And frankly, it was a 20-minute meeting. We just kind of bantered some things around, and so I'd like to just reinforce that. but that was, what are some goals and some direction that this task force can provide the administration going forward? And one of those things is that the Department of Commerce awarded the town of Stevensville a $10,000 grant for some capacity building, or for lack of a better term, community building, on what does our Main Street or our business program look like in Stevensville? A group of individuals got together, wrote the grant on the town's behalf, and they were successful in that application. And so we've got a $10,000 grant to spend. It's supposed to look at, is there a program or financing strategy that could sustain a program for a business association, essentially. We'll pull some, I think what we'll do is pull the application together and send that out to you, but I would like this task force's input as to how, or some ideas as to how we best proceed, given that from the time the grant was submitted and awarded to today, obviously a lot has changed for our business community. Certainly it's going to be an elaborate process, but I'd like some starting steps. So keep that in the back of your head, and maybe if something comes to mind now, I'd love to hear it. But for the time being, we'll at least send that application out to you guys, so you can at least see what was proposed with the grant and what we can do with it. So we're working with Department of Commerce. They've indicated that they'll reach out to the individual or the communities that were successful in those grants. They'll reach out to us and discuss if any scope to that funding needs to change. And so that's on the table. They put that on the table to say, if the scope in that funding, if the way you said you were going to use the funding may be different today than it was when you said you were going to use it, they're open to discussing that. So if there's ideas or something we need to modify there, they will entertain that.
So, hey, Brandon, was there a specific use for that grant when we applied for it?
The specific use, in paraphrasing, was to say, we'd like to pull together a group of people to look at what is the future of a Main Street program in Stevensville. And is there a more stable funding outline for that program? Because the challenge was, right, that the Main Street program did not have a sustainable funding source. Fundraising wasn't cutting it. Is there enough? And so the money was then to say, we need to look at, Siri's bugging me here. We need to look at how can we sustainably fund that organization or an organization like it. So the 501c3 of the Main Street Association still exists. There's a small 3-member board of directors for it. And so it's basically been mothballed until such time that either a group of people wants to carry it and run with it again, or we dissolve it and start, somebody starts another organization to support the business community.
Don't dissolve it. You can always maybe use, that's nonprofit status takes time to get. You can always redo the mission usually.
I think there's a lot of things we can do with that rather than just as, letting it go. We'll put it to good use.
Great.
Is there a time frame on that too, for the grant to be used?
There was when we initially got the funding, and we've had success in dealing with Department of Commerce on some extensions. So we're gonna work on that as soon as we get some more information from them. So what the process looks like, we're gonna decide what kind of time frame. But I think the initial time frame was a year. I think that they're extending that because of COVID-19, because we'd be halfway there by now. So, and that may be, I don't know. And so I'll send some information about that, let you guys mull it over, and I'd love to hear some recommendations. which shifts us into kind of the next space we discussed last week is I would like, we did kind of mentioned it at the beginning of the meeting, I would like us to come out with maybe some sort of a list of formal recommendations to the town and to the community as to what the future of economic support recovery in Stevensville looks like. And I realize that may take a little bit of work. And I'd like to pull some graphs together for you folks to look at so that we can kind of get a sense of some examples. So you kind of see what I'm thinking in my mind. But, you know, one of those recommendations may be, here's how we recommend you utilize the $10,000 grant from Congress. You know, another recommendation may be that we temporarily, just speaking in terms of examples, not advocating one way or another, I want to be very clear. One recommendation may be that we relax encroachment standards downtown so that if sidewalk sales want to be held outdoors, that we can do that. Because our current ordinances restrict some of that activity. So things, you know, if there's like a policy that needs to be modified or temporarily suspended or something like that, we need to know those things so that we can implement the processes to do that. But also if there's programs we need to implement or resources we need to seek, we'd love to hear that as well. And have it in terms of a formal report so that as we go into budgeting and we go into strategic planning from the city's behalf, long after this is over, we have some sort of basis to go off to say, look, the economic restructure or economic recovery task force made these recommendations and we'd like to incorporate those into this program. So that's part of my motive behind having a solid list. That's formal. Anything else? You guys are my favorite group to meet with because you know how to have a quick, precise, short meeting. So from here, I think there's some kind of subcommittees operating with some questions and some survey work. I'll get the information to you folks regarding that $10,000 commerce grant, and we'll just plan on getting together again next week. Does that work? Wonderful.
It does.
All right, have a great rest of your week. Meeting with you makes it feel like Friday. I want to tell you that, like, you're also
You're so happy.
totally changed the rest of the week, and now I have to turn this off and realize it's only Tuesday. Thanks a lot.
I have to figure out how to log myself out of 2 accounts here.
There's 2 of you. It's double the trouble. All right, thanks.
Have a good day, you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye.
See you, everyone.